Good morning. I see everybody coming through the door. We'll just give it a couple seconds here to let you all file in. I hope you're having a good morning this morning. Welcome to the Grand Rapids 2030 District webinar. Today, we have some great guests with us, and we are going to be exploring renewable energy for Grand Rapids. And over the last few weeks, we've been exploring several topics. Let me just introduce myself real quick. My name is Sherry Holman. I'm the Executive Director of the U.S. Green Building Council of West Michigan, and we facilitate the Grand Rapids 2030 District. So for folks who are new to the Grand Rapids 2030 District, we are a public-private partnership of building owners that are reaching for zero carbon. Just some housekeeping before we begin. There is a Q&A. Please ask your questions in the Q&A. There's also a chat box. Please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat box. And just to make it fun and get everybody rolling, why don't you tell us what your favorite midnight snack is? What gets you up at night and you absolutely have to get up and head to the refrigerator? And I'll just say for me, that's pasta. If pasta's in my refrigerator, like I must consume it. So welcome again, and let me forward my screen here. So today we're here to talk about the E.H.Zero project, and to the long version of that is the Grand Rapids policies and programs for equitable, healthy, zero carbon buildings. So the E.H.Zero project is working to identify policies and programs for Grand Rapids that will equitably reduce carbon in the built environment and lead to better health outcomes for the residents of Grand Rapids. Please catch our other recorded sessions. This has been a 6-part series, and you can find those on our YouTube channel. We've taken a deep dive into E.H.Zero so you can really understand what the project is about. We've done one on energy benchmarking and disclosure, building performance standards, point of sale, energy and operational disclosure. And then today we're going to be talking about renewable electricity for large commercial buildings. We have with us today Alison Sutter with the Office of Sustainability and Performance Management for the City of Grand Rapids, Margrethe Kearney, Senior Attorney from Environmental Law and Policy Center, and Eric Clinton with the director. He's the Director of Renewable Energy Products for Consumers Energy. I will get to my screen to go forward here, but it doesn't want to. Let's try this. There we go. So quick, just to introduce our partners on the E.H.Zero, the Grand Rapids 2030 District is proud to be partnered with the City of Grand Rapids and the Urban Core Collective with primary funding from the Wege Foundation and the Kresge Foundation. So just to preview, next 2 weeks from now, we'll be diving deep into compliance pathways for carbon neutral buildings, and we'll be talking about zero code. You're all registered for that as part of the series, so please join us on May 5th at 9 a.m. Also doing an in-person deep dive into the E.H.Zero project on May 10th in Grand Rapids. So if you're in Grand Rapids, please feel free to join us there. And just as a quick thank you to, none of this is possible without our supporters. We thank DTE, Consumers Energy, the State of Michigan, the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy, and the Wege Foundation. So this is a little bit, we're not going to stick to a perfect script here, but just to give you a little bit of timeline, we'll talk to Eric first, then Margrethe and Alison, and we'll have plenty of time for Q&A. So please make sure to put your Q&A questions in the chat box. So without further ado, I will pass it over to Eric.
Thanks, Sherry. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here this morning and speak to everybody about Consumers Energy's Clean Energy Plan, and also share with you some of our renewable offerings that we have available to help our customers on their sustainability journey. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And give me just a second here. Apologies, because we did this, we did a test run and it went really well, and now I'm struggling a little bit. So
We see your slides, Eric. No problem. I think if you just hit the X on that little box, hopefully.
let's see, just X out of this and then. Okay, is it, it feels like it's not in a full screen mode here.
In your bottom right-hand corner,
Okay,
you've got a,
there we
there
go.
it is.
Okay, we got there. Thank you. Yeah, so good morning, everyone. I'm Eric Clinton, Director of Renewable Energy Products here at Consumers Energy. And so I have overall responsibility for all of our customer-facing renewable offerings, whether it's an electric product or a natural gas offering. And that is across all of our customers. So it would include residential, small to medium businesses, as well as our large commercial and industrial customers. So that's where my group focuses all of their time, energy, and resources on what I would say developing offerings to help solve our customers' problems. So I'm going to start here. I only have 2 slides, and I'm going to kind of hit the high notes here, but this is Consumers Energy as a whole. So not necessarily our specific area, but just kind of describing what our clean energy plan is on a go forward basis. So, you know, one of the big initiatives we have is that all of our coal-fired plants will be retired by 2025. That was reaffirmed in an announcement yesterday. We reached a settlement on our integrated resource plan with all of our stakeholders. So we are very proud of that announcement. By 2040, we are expecting that 60% of our electric capacity will come from renewable sources. So not sure if anybody out there has seen some of the big announcements that we've made, but we have an ambition to develop about 8,000 megawatts of solar energy by 2040. And to put that into perspective, 1 megawatt would provide enough energy to power about 250 residential homes. So a very big ambition and vision there. Another component of our clean energy plan that was actually announced at the end of March is that for our natural gas system, we want to have net zero greenhouse gas emissions from that system by 2050. So again, just a lot of good progress. This is a journey that we're going to be on for many years, but again, just a very big ambition. It's a bold ambition. Grid modernization and battery storage to help lower customers' peak demand. That's an integral part of this plan as well. And then when I think about this, some of the feedback that we receive is, well, how do you accomplish all of this? And I would say that we accomplish it in a manner that is affordable for our customers, provides reliability for our customers. And so that's where we believe the plan that we've put forward will actually end up saving customers $600 million through 2040. So again, just to recap, this is our broader clean energy plan for Consumers Energy as a whole. The next slide that I'm going to jump into is specific to the efforts and the products that our team is responsible for here at Consumers. So, you know, if I were to say in general, we have what I believe are awesome, high quality, flexible, cost competitive options for our customers. And that could be residential customers, it could be small to medium business customers, and it could be our large commercial and industrial customers. So the first program that we have here is called Solar Gardens. So when you think of solar gardens, I want you to think of smaller community solar that has high visibility. So we currently have 3 projects that we've completed, and those are at Western Michigan University, Grand Valley State University, and then up north in the city of Cadillac. So smaller facilities, and typically the way they work is that we have what we would call an anchor tenant or a project sponsor. In this instance, it was Western Michigan, Grand Valley, the city of Cadillac, where they subscribe to a portion of that facility, and then the balance of that facility, we would market that to our residential small to medium business customers so that they're able to meet their sustainability needs in a flexible, cost competitive manner, does not require upfront investment on their part. They can select a month-to-month contract if they desire. They don't have the risk of owning and operating a solar facility. So again, just a very easy, cost-effective way for customers to participate. And what we found in speaking with our customers is that the program helps them put their sustainability values into practice, and that especially on the residential side, it's just that ability to protect the environment for future generations, for their kids, for their grandkids. So that is that I guess is the customer need for this type of offering. Moving down the list here, the next is our large customer renewable program. So this program, I will just say, is just super cool. We have our one of our largest customers right now, and this has been announced publicly, is General Motors. So what is this product? Essentially, we have assets, new built assets here in the state of Michigan. They're local. They're competitively bid. And what happens is that customer comes to us and says, hey, I want to subscribe to that asset for a 10, 15, or 20-year term. At that time, the price of that product is locked in for the duration of that term and will not change. I look at it as almost like it's a mortgage payment in essence, where it's recovering the cost of that facility as well as the upkeep on it. And what they also get is, for every unit of electricity produced, that electricity is being sold into the market, and they are receiving the market value of that electricity. So their rate is locked in, it's fixed. And if you believe that energy prices will increase in the future, it provides them with the ability to subscribe to renewable energy. And there are energy and capacity market price forecast out there that would say that that price that they will receive as a credit in the market will exceed their subscription price in the future, thereby reducing the cost of their bundled energy. The next program here on the list is My Clean Air. And this is a carbon offset program. This is for our natural gas customers. And I'm super excited, very proud. We are launching this program. It literally is going live today. So you can go to our website, you can subscribe to this product today. It's for all of our customers. And essentially what it is when you're utilizing natural gas, you're creating carbon. And so what this allows you to do is it allows you to offset that carbon with forestry-based carbon offset. So we've gone out, we've partnered with a forest here in Michigan to generate these carbon offsets. And it's just a really cool way, again, to, help our customers put their sustainability values into practice. Again, looking to future generations, grandkids, kids, just improving the health and well-being of Michiganders as a whole. So again, super excited about this program. It's a 1-year subscription, no upfront cost. And after that 1 year expires, customers can go month to month on this program. Again, really excited. And then our last program here, I would say, when I look at this sheet, I would say Solar Gardens, large customer renewable program. These are what I would call our premium products. These are our highest quality. They're local, Michigan made wind and solar electricity. And what we also have is that, sometimes those products have a tendency to cost a little bit more. We have customers that really desire the fact that it's within the state of Michigan, that it's creating a cleaner and greener grid. So those products work well for them. But then we also have customers that they're hyper focused on cost. They're extremely cost sensitive, and they still need to meet their sustainability goals. So we have a renewable energy credit program where essentially we can go out, canvass the market, look for any type of renewable energy credit that is available in the market, local, national. It could be from different technology types. It could be from wind. It could be from solar. It could be from landfill gas or, run-of-river hydro. Find them the absolute best, call it rock bottom price, and then offer that to our customers, kind of at their discretion. We can tailor it to exactly what type of offset or what type of renewable energy credit they are looking for. And so I look at this as kind of like our, this is like the discount product, like this is dirt cheap, low cost, very flexible. We have 1 and 3 year terms available to our customers. So I feel like I've talked an awful lot about these products. It's just that I'm excited about them, and we are more than excited to help our customers, fulfill some of the unmet needs that we see in the market. So with that, I'll stop there.
Sherry, are we just going one after the other and doing questions at the end?
Yeah. Thanks, Eric. I was just looking for my unmute button. Yeah, let's, there's a few questions in the chat box and I'll save those for the end, and we'll ask all the questions at the end if that works for everyone. And I'll pass it over to you, Margrethe.
Great, thank you. And I saw the questions coming through and they look excellent. So keep them coming. I think it'll be a great Q&A session. So I'm Margrethe Kearney. I'm a senior attorney with the Environmental Law and Policy Center. I do a lot of clean energy work in front of the Public Service Commission, and in fact, represented a number of clients who were part of the settlement that Eric mentioned for their integrated resource plan. We're very excited about it. One component I wanted to flag here is it has provisions that will require consumers to do modeling on environmental justice and environmental justice impacts. And it also has provisions that have more community outreach. So consumers will need to educate and engage with the communities in its service territory more in developing the next plan. So those are really exciting gains. And I know there are folks who are here on this call and in the audience who were instrumental in developing the case and making this settlement happen. So, Eric talked about this journey towards sustainability. Every now and then I have an issue with the use of the word journey, because quite honestly, sometimes it doesn't feel like a journey. That's too much of an amble. It feels more like a ruck. It feels like a struggle. It feels like we're clawing our way forward. That isn't to be pessimistic, but I just want to point out that if you feel that way on this journey sometimes, that is totally normal and will be part of your experience, as this is just, it's a new area where we're really trying to push boundaries right now. And I'm going to talk about 3 particular things: on-site solar, community solar, and then kind of RECs, which includes some of the VGP programs that Eric talked about. And I'm talking about these three because they're options for any interested party who is reducing their energy use through efficiency, but obviously still has, electricity needs and need to get that energy from somewhere and want it to be carbon neutral, right, as part of sustainability goals. And so some of the options, the first option that many people look towards is, can I install solar on site? The first thing is there space to do that? So in Michigan, you can only self-serve, produce your own energy from solar if it's on your property or immediately adjacent to your property, because you can't use the utilities lines to have a project somewhere that's 4 blocks over on an empty field and then deliver it to your location. So it has to be really on site. So having the right space for it is important. There are a lot of benefits to doing on-site solar. One is you are actually using the energy that you generate, right? You know that this renewable energy you're generating is going to meet your needs on the site. And I know there was a question in the chat about how do you know when you're part of a community solar garden that you're actually using that energy, right? With on-site solar, because you can see it. It's visible, so you can demonstrate this is part of our commitment, it's part of our culture. I think that's really meaningful for a lot of people to have a visible manifestation of their values. You can control it and see it and manage it in a way that could help you manage your overall electric costs, especially if you're able to pair with something like solar. So it sounds really exciting, right? So why doesn't everybody in the world have solar panels all over their house? It can be a little bit of a challenge. The first thing you need to do is interconnect with the utility. So unless you're totally off grid, you have to have an interconnection with your utility because you're putting energy back on the system at times when you're producing more than you consume. There are interconnection rules that are set by the Michigan Public Service Commission. So if you're interested in doing solar, understanding the Michigan Public Service Commission and the regulation of utilities is really important, because it turns out that a lot of our local decision makers, like Allison, they don't have anything to do with this. They don't have any control over it or any power over how you interconnect with the utility. That all happens at a statewide agency called the Michigan Public Service Commission. And right now, there's a big argument about some of these rules that's taking place. There was a new set of rules that was proposed, and the Michigan Public Service Commission adopted and is trying to get those finalized, but the utilities are objecting to those rules. They don't like them because they think that they create safety concerns for workers. These are rules that are already implemented in many other states. Other states use these constantly. There aren't issues or concerns with safety in those states. And so we are working very hard at the Public Service Commission to try to get these interconnection rules passed so that that process is easier for customers, right? Because most people don't have a whole lot of time to spend 8 hours a day figuring out how to get an interconnection application process. You have to interconnect, and then you also have to figure out, well, how's this going to work financially? How am I going to pay for this system? And as Allison mentioned, there are different tariffs that have different compensation mechanisms. Any system that's 150 kilowatts and lower, so most of the systems that would be on a commercial building, those are under the distributed generation tariff. So that replaced net metering. I saw a question about net metering. We don't have net metering in Michigan anymore. That was done away with as part of 2016 energy legislation. So now we have something that's called the distributed generation tariff. And that tariff provides less value for the energy that goes back onto the system to the utility than net metering did. And the utilities are consistently trying to reduce that amount even further. And so it's important to get a sense of what's happening with those rates and what the utilities are proposing. There's a cap on people who can participate in that program, and it's 1% of utilities load. Consumers got close to meeting that cap, and they voluntarily increased it to 3%, which was really exciting, and we were really happy to see. So that's exciting. So in consumers' territory, there isn't as much of a concern. Now you can still use this distributed generation tariff. it's unclear what happens after consumers hits that 3%. So that's an issue that we have to figure out. And it's helpful to have, stakeholders and people asking questions and being interested about that, because the Michigan Public Service Commission has to figure that out. And rates can always change. And so that's something that you need to think about when you're putting solar on, is what tariff am I going to be on? Is the utility going to require me to be on a different tariff? Do I need to be on a time of use tariff? Should I be on a time of use tariff? I really encourage everyone, if you're thinking about this, to talk to folks at consumers and at the utility to try to work with them. There's sometimes this underlying tension when we think about utilities and we talk about utilities, because especially with on-site generation, the way utilities make money is they get a return on any of their capital investments. So if you build a big solar array that the company owns, if the company builds that, they get a return on that. They earn money and they get to charge customers for that return. They collect it. If I generate solar on my house, the utility doesn't earn any money from that. And so that's a tension, right? The utility doesn't like that. The same way, for a long time, utilities weren't really excited about energy efficiency, because it just meant I bought less of the electricity. But the commission and a lot of policy folks came up with some really great ways of figuring out the right incentives so that utilities would want to do energy efficiency, so that it could benefit the utility and it could benefit customers. And I'm really hopeful that we continue in conversations with the utility about how to do that with distributed generation, because I think it could be really great. The settlement that Eric mentioned has a provision in it where the utility agreed to look at and to model rebates for distributed generation. So the utility could say, well, this is really a resource to us. If you're generating on your home, we're getting a benefit from that. Maybe we should actually incentivize you to do that. So there's a lot there, and it can get real complicated real fast. But talk to the utility, go in and make sure you've got a contact with someone that knows what they're talking about and can help you with those issues. Community solar. Community solar is not really a thing in Michigan because there's no ability to have non-utility ownership of a solar array. So we have things that we call community solar because individuals are able to subscribe to portions, and it sort of feels like you're purchasing a portion of the solar array, but you aren't. You're paying the utility to use it, and the utility owns that community solar. A lot of people believe that community solar needs to be owned by the community and not the utility. That currently is not something that can happen in Michigan unless we pass legislation that allows it to happen. So that's something to think about when you're considering something called community solar as an option. And then the third thing I wanted to talk about quickly was some of these, what I kind of think of as like contracts for renewable energy. And Eric mentioned the voluntary green pricing programs that the utilities offer. All the utilities have to offer. Consumers has a number of them. And one of the things about these is you're not, the concept, I think, and what you're doing if you participate in one of these programs, the way I think about it is, it's not like I have solar on my house and I know I'm displacing some amount of energy with that solar. When you participate in voluntary green pricing, what you're really doing is trying to move the broader market, right? So you're saying to the utility, I will pay you more money if you generate more renewable energy. And electrons are electrons. Whatever generates them, they go on the grid. It's not like they come to my house from the solar garden. But I'm telling the utility, you please generate more renewable energy and I will pay you more money for that. And then I can sort of take credit for that. I get a renewable energy credit. And if I have a goal as a company, I can say 100% of my energy comes from green energy because I've paid consumers to generate more. But remember that's what these are, is they're really sort of market moving devices. And one of the reasons why the Michigan programs, I think, are a little bit more effective at reaching those actual goals is that they drive renewable energy in Michigan. If you're buying a national rec or participating in a national program, you have to be really careful about where that comes from. Is it coming from a wind farm in Texas? Is it coming from a wind farm in Texas that was built 5 years ago? And so you're really not moving a market at all because it's already built, it's already operating. So you really do have to be sort of careful, I think, about those programs, especially if it's really important to you as sort of a value of your company or your home, that you really are achieving certain goals as opposed to making statements. You got to make sure that those values are reflected in what you're purchasing to make it worth the extra money that you're paying. So that's my like whirlwind thought on those 3 things, and then hope for good questions.
Thanks. That is a lot to unpack.
I know.
I love it though. It's great. Alison, let's hear from you, and then we'll take audience questions.
All right. Well, thank you both to Eric, Margrethe, and also to Sherry for hosting us today on this exciting topic of renewable energy. So I'm kind of taking, right, we have the utility information, and Margrethe helps us understand the regulatory and legislative information. And then I'm going to try to help explain, as a person working for an organization, how we have attempted to increase and reach our renewable energy goals and some of the obstacles that we faced and some of that. But I do just want to say one thing from the very beginning. First, I asked for a little grace from everyone in the audience. If you're not aware, we have a lot going on at the city. And I want to take a moment here for a second for a moment of silence, just to reflect on the officer-involved shooting that we have tragically experienced in our community. It's a lot for everyone working at the city, and it's a lot for people in our community. So if you just bear with me for a minute on that. Thank you. And I just also want to start with, equity is one of our core values at the city of Grand Rapids. And I'm going to be very clear, and I've been more vocal about this. I am really struggling with having conversations, advocating, and even recommending that the city invest money in renewable energy or solar panels with the lack of access for many in our community. Sini, I saw your note about neighborhoods having access to renewable energy. And I think it's an important part of our equation, but I think that there is so much that we can be doing with our investments and our resources and the wealth of knowledge of people participating here today that could be really helping to improve energy efficiency of low-income homes in our community, that can really directly support affordable housing and some other things. So broader parts of our E.H.Zero program, renewable energy is an important component, particularly, I think, for our larger commercial stakeholders. And so I'm grateful that we're having this conversation here today. I just wanted to frame in terms of at least my thought process on kind of renewable energy holistically at the city. So I did put together a hodgepodge of slides. Again, I didn't have time to format them or put them all in the same format or anything like that. But some of the things I want to share are a little technical. And so I will send these out to anybody who wants them to share them. And there are just a few things that I'm going to share. So if you're not familiar, City of Grand Rapids, we have had some goals for a while, and I will share some information about some of those goals and what we've been doing to try to accomplish those goals. So, and some of this information is dated. Again, I know I have more updated information, but things are pretty busy for us. So, so I've tried to note when information's a little bit dated. So just bear with me for that, if you would mind, please. So this is 2018 information, but just to put in perspective, I think it's critically important. Anyone who's interested in renewable energy, first you need to understand, what are you consuming in your own facility? How much are you consuming? How much does it cost? And right, there's a difference between if your goals are around renewable energy and electricity, or if your goals are around greenhouse gas emission reduction, also referred to as carbon reduction. And knowing what those goals are, they're very different. I'm going to stick to renewable energy today, but it does tie into our broader greenhouse gas emission goals. So at the city, right, and this is really important for large commercial stakeholders that might be participating, right? I mean, we have over 330 utility accounts, over 200 facilities. Like, the time and the ability to just even understand how much energy you are using holistically across those facilities is about the equivalent of at least a full-time person, or at least a really good intern that you have that can get everything set up for a long time, get your information into Energy Star so that you can actually understand. And where this put us is, I understand now that we have been spending almost $10 million on energy for our facilities. But the large majority of that in terms of cost, 90% is our electricity costs. 60% of all the energy we consume, we have steam, we have natural gas as well, comes from electricity. And 77% of all of the greenhouse gas emissions from energy consumption comes from electricity. So for us, electricity is very important. Okay, so I won't go into all this. Some of these I'm going to go through faster just for the people who get into the technical numbers and like to understand things. I wanted you to have it available. And so again, we're doing a lot, talks about electricity specifically. And here really, right, as an organization, we have 2 large water utilities. They use an enormous amount of electricity to clean and pump potable water to everybody in our community, and then to accept and process all of the sewer and wastewater that comes to us, as well as we own our street lighting system downtown, which is another really big user that's different from kind of your traditional commercial building structures. I do want to take a minute though to acknowledge my colleagues who have been with the city for a long time and have done some amazing work around reduction. I can't emphasize enough energy efficiency, energy efficiency, energy efficiency first, because guess what? Having solar and renewable energy is great, but we don't need to build solar panels if we don't need to be consuming the energy. So I will always be a first and foremost proponent of energy efficiency, and we've done a lot to reduce our electricity. So we've had a goal of 100% renewable electricity for our municipal operations, not the community, our municipal operations, in place since about 2008. We were one of the first to really establish such an audacious goal way back in 2008 with former Mayor Hartwell. And that goal was set for 2025 at this point in time. And when I think about what's our path to get to renewable energy as an organization, we think first about what is consumers' energy supplying us. Right. And Eric talked a lot about their goals. I'm grateful that they've made voluntary commitments because they're not legally required by any law in Michigan to achieve those goals. They've made them voluntarily. Right. But there is this tension between advocates and people thinking, well, we need to hit these goals faster, concerned about greenhouse gas and climate change impacts. And so, but for me, the most effective and efficient way for our community to achieve 100% renewable energy is for our utility to be supplying us with 100% renewable energy, right? That means all the buildings in our community, all the homes in our community, all of the city's buildings will be at 100% renewable. Right. But that's the tension. You know, do you think you need to meet it faster than when the utility will provide it? And also, quite frankly, some people just have the desire to own and control their own electricity generation for reliability purposes and other purposes. And that's an important factor too. Talked about energy efficiency. Of course, we've been spending a lot of time on solar. I'm not going to talk about our biodigester much, but that's a big important component. It actually falls under energy efficiency. And then Margrethe talked about purchasing renewable energy credits, and I'll talk about that a little bit. So where are we? Historically, we were at 34% on our goal. That's been stagnant for quite some time. The majority of that is really based on consumers' energies, renewable programs and what we get from them right now. And then we also have been purchasing annually renewable energy credits, about 115,000 kilowatt hours per year. So we are currently at 37.5% with our current data. So also just quickly in terms of like, how are we doing in comparison to other communities? This is based on, the graph is based on performance, but it also includes goals. So when you look at the green bars around performance, this is actually showing Grand Rapids as the 3rd best performer in terms of renewable energy with our 37.5%. You know, Austin, great work. They're at 100%. They own their own utility. So they can do a lot of things faster and different than we can do in our area. And you can see some people have some really audacious goals. So do we. But while we think goals are important, we actually think performance is better. And so we've really been focused on increasing our rates so that we are performing along these goals. Little technical, but once you understand your actual consumption, the next thing you have to look at is moving into the future, right? I know where I'm at right now. I know I'm 37.5% renewable, but what does this mean for me in the future? When you're making decisions about solar panels, they have a life expectancy of 25 years, right? I need to understand what that means over 25 years and how much it costs to be able to make a decision strategically on how we should achieve our goal. So this is looking at, and this is a model built out to 2025. It was built a couple years ago. So, right, we show how much are we actually consuming at that time. So this blue bar is actually what we need to offset with renewables to achieve 100% renewable energy goal. We know that over those 5 years, we're going to actually see an increase in how much we're consuming based on growth in our customers for water utilities, right? So some of your businesses, you might be expecting to grow, adding more buildings to your facility, adding more manufacturing to your organization, for et cetera. So you need to be taking into consideration that growth because you'll be consuming more electricity. If you're planning electric vehicles, got to include that, right? It's going to go up. Right. And so, but we are also taking into consideration energy efficiency based on projects that had been approved. So for us, that's again, our water resource recovery facility biodigester. We're in the process of transitioning 18,000 streetlights to LEDs, and we're in the process of building our Lake Michigan filtration plant solar array. So those things we're taking into consideration, as well as some other energy efficiency goals, right? Again, bring down how much you're consuming so you don't have to offset it with renewable. Right, we have a very, very small solar array. We were one of the first to put some in at our Oak Industrial facility in 2012. It does not generate a lot, right? I told you we are really also adding into our model how much consumers is supplying us. As they continue to grow in their renewable generation, this will grow over time. And if you want to sit and wait until 2040, which Eric, I thought your slide said maybe 60% renewable by 2040. You'll have to correct me later if I'm wrong. But right, that means that essentially everybody who buys electricity from consumers will have 60% renewable energy. Okay, but that's not until 2040. So you have to decide what your goals are for your organization. This we took out purchasing of RECs so we could understand what we had left to offset. So based on this scenario and this modeling and looking at our goal date of 2025, we knew that we still had 37 million kilowatt hours that we had to figure out how we are going to offset that with renewables. And we actually based the Consumers Energy Renewable Portfolio Standard on where we expected them to be in 2025, which was 15%. So you got to understand what you need in order to make a plan for what you want to do. So a couple of quick things, Margrethe hit on these, but when I talk about them with respect to the city, I think they're really important. So I actually wanted to put them on a slide, right? So what's really important is first thinking about the size of your solar array. These are my definitions. These aren't, I'd be curious, Margrethe or Eric or somebody let me know if your definitions are different. But when I talk about a small array, I'm talking about stuff you can put on your home, stuff we could put on City Hall, stuff you could probably put on a commercial office building, you know, in Grand Rapids, less than a megawatt, right? And I had a note here, City of Grand Rapids zoning. I don't have time to talk about it today, but would be happy to share with you some other presentations we've done about the work we're doing to make it easier for people in Grand Rapids who want to install solar by way of getting your permits and your requirements under our zoning ordinance. And that'll be part of our master plan process, but we have changed it so that anyone can install solar on the south facing side of their building if it is also street facing by right. If you're facing and if you have it facing in a different way, you still have to make a case for why you need to put it or why you want to put it on a different side of your building. And that's if you have a flat roof, that doesn't apply to you. That's just if it's visual. So large scale, and I should just also note, we have seen a pretty steady growth in the number of solar permits that we have been granting in the city of Grand Rapids over the last 5 years. So that's been really exciting and seeing more demand there. Large scale I define as between 1 and 10 megawatts and utility scale greater than 10 megawatts. I'm not really going to talk too much about utility scale, but that is kind of where Butterworth falls. And I wanted to talk about that. So type of array. Some people have mentioned these, but I think this is really important and it took me quite a while. And I have people like Margrethe helping me and Eric and people at Consumers and that have been on our energy advisory committee that have been helping me. So I would love to figure out how can we make this easier for people in Grand Rapids, particularly for small businesses who might want to explore and understand this, kind of getting back to that equity component, to take this very technical information where sometimes organizations, you got to pay a consultant or have somebody else to do this analysis for you to even understand whether it's feasible for you to install solar. And we need to make that easier for people who have smaller installations to look into that. But behind the meter, right, means like what Margrethe said, you're generating your own electricity and you're using it yourself, right? And that to me, I have found, and I'll talk a little bit, has been the most financially sound path for the city to look at. Because when we can actually install solar on our own facilities, we've then reduced how much electricity we have to buy. And that's when you would have like a faster return on investment, right? Over the course of a 25-year lifespan of the solar panels, we have actually found where we will save more money than we would spend on the cost of installing solar. And that's really the goal. A lot of people want solar to be a cost savings, but unfortunately, due to a lot of things, and I'll share a little bit, that's not really the case so much in Grand Rapids and different things. But I also want to mention, regardless of the size of your array, if you can consume 100% of the electricity generated by that array 100% of the time, right? If your building shuts down on Saturday and Sunday, you probably have significantly less consumption happening on Saturday and Sunday, right? And if you want to, you have so much more flexibility, and it makes good financial sense when you can consume all of the electricity you generate all of the time. But it's really tricky because a lot of times you're consuming a lot of energy probably during the middle of the day on a Tuesday when you might be in full operation. But if on Sunday or if at midnight if on Sunday you're not consuming that amount, well, then you're stuck in a place where you won't be using the electricity that you're producing. And that's when you have to give it back to the grid, because otherwise you have too much electricity, you don't have anything to do with it. And that's when you have to participate in the distributed generation, get the interconnection that Margrethe mentioned, and partner with the utility. And that's distributed generation tariff. Front of the meter, really, Eric talked about those and excited about consumers' voluntary green pricing programs. And Margrethe already talked about community solar, the utility versus the community owned. So you got to understand what your goals are and what you're trying to achieve. So just really quickly, this is our Lake Michigan filtration plant, and we are doing the behind the meter. 100% of the electricity we generate will be used 100% of the time. And that works because we're a water utility that runs 24/7, 365, right? But we still use a lot less at certain times, and we use a lot more at other times. So when we wanted to determine what size array can we install where we're going to consume 100% of the electricity, you have to know it's got to be down here. This is what base does it. We're only going to have an array that will produce this much because we can't produce more than this, or we'd have to sell back to the utility. And in this particular project, we set it up such that we don't do that because it also makes the most financial sense. But you do also have you would have a smaller array. We could build a much bigger array to support our needs right here, but then we'd be overproducing here. Oh, and just wanted to go back here, this quick note. Know your electricity rate. Margrethe mentioned that. It really depends. We have some facilities that have great rates, and it's a lot harder to make the case to install solar. But if you have a facility that has a really high rate, that's going to be better, right? Because the more you can reduce how much electricity you're consuming because you're producing it from your own solar, you're likely to have a better return on investment in those situations. So know your rate and ensure you're on the correct rate, because sometimes you can save a lot of money just by getting on the correct rate. And if you're a big customer with a lot of buildings, we did an audit with consumers on our 200 plus facilities and actually managed to find about $500,000 in savings just by transitioning the rates that we were on for different facilities. So that's super important from a financial perspective. So our Lake Michigan filtration plant is out in Grand Haven Township. This is the lake right here. This is our water utility, Lake Michigan Drive, Lakeshore Drive. This is where we're installing it. This is a visual for what it would look like. And Eric has been a great partner on this and not Eric. We worked with CMS Energy, which is the owner of Consumers Energy, and it's different. They're not regulated. They are like a private developer of solar, and we've been working on this project together with them, and it has been a really good partnership. Eric's been my partner for Butterworth, which I'm going to get to in a minute. So very quickly, this is just some of that information if you want to know. This is one of those projects that is amazing, right? Because it makes financial sense. Our most updated numbers actually show that our water department's going to save about $1.5 million in totality across 24 years based on this project, right? Like, how is that? How can we not sell that, right? That is amazing to be able to have that much money in savings, which impacts customer rates, people in our community, and also has all the environmental benefits that we know that come with being supplied with renewable energy. And here you can see kind of some of the provisions and how that works and some of the cost estimates. But we do have more recent updated numbers that actually show that we're expected to save about $1.5 million over that time period, right? It's a fixed rent. So we've come into an agreement and said, the city, we know what our costs are going to be. We know every year, so we can plan long-term how much those costs are going to be. And if electricity rates go up, that actually helps us because we're saving more. You know, ES Services, which is the subcontractors responsible for all the operations and maintenance. We had to relocate some trees. We're also working with them to install pollinator species under it. I think I missed the slide to actually talk about it's just under 1 megawatt in size, which is about a couple acres. And it's, you know, generating I don't have the number, but it's about 10% of all of the water utilities electricity needs is going to be generated by that solar array. There was one other thing I wanted to say there about that, but I can't think of it right now. So you can see some of the other great benefits that come with this. But I'll also tell you, we got all this done and we worked out the finance, and I was like, great, we're going to install solar. And then I was like, yeah, you know, but you got to go to Grand Haven Township and you have to get their blessing because it's located there. And guess what? Their zoning ordinance does not allow solar in the front yard. And where we were placing it technically was defined as the front yard of our water utility, right? So here I thought we had this like slam dunk, finally we were going to get solar, it was going to work. And it was like, we had almost a whole nother year that we went through the Grand Haven Township Zoning Board of Appeals. We had to get a variance approval. There are a number of people there who were up in arms. Don't put solar out here. You're going to devalue our properties on the lake shore. It's going to be ugly. We don't want to look at it. But, you know, we had a lot of good conversations and helped them understand the benefits. We did a lot of renderings. I don't have a picture here of a rendering, but needless to say, it does not block any views of the lakes. We agreed to spend about $250,000 more just to put in a hedge so that it's kind of sheltered from views along the road and from anybody that lives there. But still a lot of work and things to get over. So I just want you to be aware that those are things that happen, right? Grand Rapids, we have our own zoning ordinance about where you can put solar and how and what it looks like and how big it is. So just be aware that that's got to be a part of your process too, likely, if you're doing that. Okay, sorry, I'm trying to make sure we get to questions, but I know a lot of people have asked me questions about these specific projects, so I wanted to share them, right? I get lots of questions about Butterworth, like what's going on with Butterworth? It is this large 190-acre closed Superfund site that has been fully remediated under federal law. It's got a really big cap on it, right, to keep everything below. And we own the majority of the property, but the EPA entered a consent decree with a group called the Butterworth Site Group, where it's all the parties that were responsible for the contamination at the site. So the city's one, Consumers Energy is one, and others are parties as well. And ultimately that group has the authority to say what gets to happen on Butterworth because they're the ones that are held responsible for maintaining the remediation that was put in place. Nobody wants that cap to be implicated because if that's what protects people in the environment, right? And so what that means is normally, right? I mean, it was like, oh, there's this big site, build a building. Nope, can't. You can't drill down into the ground, right? I mean, even putting solar panels, you can't put bathrooms. People were like, put up football fields. We did all these studies about what could we do? What's a beneficial reuse of Butterworth? Bathrooms, you can't drill into the cap. I mean, you can't put anything into the ground there that would jeopardize the legitimacy of that cap. Right. So basically we did this big, long study with the EPA and found out that there's like 3 beneficial reuses of this site. Ballasted solar panels, just an open field with nothing else, or a parking lot. Okay. Not going to do a parking lot. We've had an open field for a long time. People enjoy, we have walking paths all around it, and we're going to maintain those walking paths and keep those in place. But we have been for quite some time trying to pursue putting solar on this. We did an RFP in 2015. Some of you might be familiar with it. It was to put about a 2 to 4 megawatt array down here in what's called A2. And then we were actually had to either take it over or under the river to get it to our water resource recovery facility, because that's what it was going to directly supply. Going back to Margrethe and what she said, under the law, behind the meter, the solar panels have to be supplying electricity either immediately to that property or immediately adjacent to that property. Okay. And so we worked through all that, but the company went bankrupt and it fell through. Right. And so fast forward now, we have our biodigester. They've significantly reduced how much electricity they're consuming based on that. And that's no longer really a viable off-taker of electricity, if you will. So where are we at now? Well, now we're at this point where we still want to try to see if we can do something behind the meter. The only viable opportunity for us is we have our primary circuit, which is our street lighting predominantly in about 100 buildings that is adjacent to this side of the Butterworth landfill. So great, we want to try to take solar, put it here and directly supply our street lighting system so we can help achieve our renewable energy goals at a more financially viable option and also supply ourselves. Well, there's still a lot of complexities. I won't go into all of them here, but I get lots of questions about like, why aren't you just doing it? One, our electricity lines that exist aren't even capable of taking on a large amount of electricity. Two, most of what we have in our primary circuit is street lighting, right? Go back to that graph of like behind the meter. Are you using the electricity all the time? Well, our street lights are on at night. Most of the time your solar panels are not producing at night, right? It doesn't match up. So we would be generating a lot of electricity in the middle of the day on Sunday with nowhere for the electricity to go, right? So then our option is at that time to work with consumers and put it on their grid, right? That's the other option. We're trying to do the behind the meter to the extent we can, and I appreciate their willingness to work with us on that and explore that, right? But in general, if we look at the entire Butterworth landfill, we have so much space, we'd be generating an enormous amount of electricity, and we definitely can't use it all 100% of the time. So we've done some early studies and have shown that about 12 megawatts could be built right here, excuse me, on A1, A2, C1. This middle part is owned by somebody else, so we can't put there. We've looked at wetlands and sun angles and everything else that you would study to make this a good site for solar. We've looked at all of that. We're trying to pursue that. But where we're at right now is, I said, again, going back to equity. One, it's expensive to put solar panels on a closed Superfund site, right? It's just going to be more expensive because you have all the ramifications of the fact that it's a closed Superfund site that has liability and risk that comes along with it. But I also really don't just want a bunch of solar panels and not have a way to help support the most vulnerable in our community and our Black and brown community. So we're working very hard with consumers under their voluntary green pricing program. They have a new filing. That program comes out every 2 years. So they have the ability to kind of amend and change their programs. Publicly, it's in the middle of it right now, but you can get all of the information on it. And they have kind of a new anchor tenant option that they're requesting from the Michigan Public Service Commission to approve, and that we would like them to approve specific to allowing municipalities to participate as an anchor tenant for closed Superfund sites or brownfield sites located in urban areas. And what we want to do is partner with maybe about a third of Butterworth to set it up as a community solar program under their Sunrise program that is specific and would support low-income residents in the city of Grand Rapids. There are lots of complexities to that. I'll leave it for questions, but I saw somebody's question, Ben, it might've been your question, right? All of this that we're doing and whatever would be front of the meter in a community solar, or even letting other businesses or organizations, which we're also pursuing, who may want to pay to put in solar on Butterworth and have, you know, in front of the meter and essentially kind of pay through an agreement to receive the electricity. You won't directly receive it, but it's a premium. It's a cost premium. It's your electricity cost plus, right? This is never going to have a return on investment. Never. It is a cost premium. It's just like buying renewable energy credits. You're always going to pay what you're paying for electricity, and then you're going to pay more to have it supplied from renewables. And that's why it's so hard to make the business and financial case for renewables, unless you can try to do a behind the meter where you're reducing your own electricity consumption. And still then you got to look at all the factors I've talked about to determine whether there's a return on investment for your project. So those are some of the things that we're looking at, but they do have the option, and we're going to go out and try to see, maybe there are companies or philanthropists or others who might want to help pay that premium price for solar to be developed on this landfill. So it has a good beneficial reuse in our community. You have solar that you would be electricity that would be generated right here in Grand Rapids, right? And it could you could be getting credit for the renewable. And if you want to contribute to help low-income residents participate, like how can we pay for that premium? And then the resident gets the benefit, right? And so anytime that community solar is generating electricity, that low-income resident will get credits on their bill and their electricity bills, mostly June, July, August, and whenever the sun is shining, right, we'll have reduced bills. That's the goal, that's the hope, that's what we're trying to work on. Okay, the last part, and then I promise I'll stop. So we also did a full analysis. We did a full analysis of 8 buildings. And again, it would cost a lot of money to have a consultant do it. We were lucky as a municipality, we got it for free. The National Renewable Energy Lab, NREL, helped us with it, and CADMIS, a national consultant, helped it with us through a federally funded program. So we looked at 8 properties. These are 4. We also then, of course, looked at Butterworth was one, Lake Michigan Filtration Plant was one, and we looked at 2 others. But these 4, I won't go into all of this, but essentially, once you get through all of this, you have to figure out technologically, can I actually install solar and will it generate solar? Okay, I will tell you this and I will repeat it and tell everyone. We have plenty of sunshine in Michigan to do solar. We have plenty of sunshine in Michigan to do solar, right? I get that question a lot, like, it's always gray here. Are you sure? Is it gonna make sense? Yes, we can, okay? And if you wanna get into more detail, I will, but hopefully right now you'll just take my word for it. We've done the studies. So these are 4 of our different buildings that we've looked at and actually found, look, we could generate, you know, if we did one under 20 kilowatts, 6.5%. If we did one this size, look how big that is, 46% we could supply of that facility's needs. This one, 74% of our fire station could be supplied by solar, that based on your roof and all the stuff you have on your roof, right? And we looked at, you want a roof that's old, you don't want a new roof, or excuse me, you want a roof that is newer. You don't want an old roof because you're probably going to have to replace your roof soon. You're not going to take off a bunch of solar panels you just put on 3 years ago, right, to replace your roof. So you want to look at one that you're either getting ready to replace the roof right now and how can you do solar at the same time, or you want to look at one where you've already recently done your roof replacement, you're in good condition, and it can support 25 years of solar panels on it. So we did that and we said, great, technologically, we can do this. We can put solar in 442 kilowatts across these facilities. Okay, but look at this note up here. This doesn't consider that variability that I talked about, right? And so what we found out then actually is that based on all of this and looking at it, and because of the distributed generation tariff and rate and how much we would have to be selling back to consumers because we can't use it all the time, that essentially from our perspective, we would be subsidizing the production of electricity for others to use. And as a municipality, we're not going to use taxpayer dollars to do that, right? And so it did not financially make sense based on the current distributed generation tariff for excess electricity that we'd be generating from these solar arrays to participate. Now, I will say there are a couple here. You can see this Market Avenue retention basin. Like there was a little bit of a net present value, right? And this study was done 2 years ago. So lots of things have changed around pricing and a lot of other things. But 2 years ago, we did have the opportunity for a net present value, a small one on some of ours, but these are all negative numbers, right? So the negative net, so we'd have to decide, do we want to invest that much? Are we willing to pay that much? There's no return on investment, right? It's a cost, even to install solar on our facility because of the current rate system. And I was actually getting ready to take this to commission and ask and have a conversation, say, look, these aren't huge costs. Is it worth it to us to invest this much money for this much renewable energy? Well, that was about February of 2020 before COVID hit, right? And then COVID hit and the city's budgets tanked. So it was no longer the appropriate time to be having a conversation about where are we going to invest extra money? We didn't have extra money, right? Like we're trying to get by. And so this has been put on hold since that time. And then that's when we transitioned and moved forward with the Lake Michigan Filtration Plant because that one offered a return on investment. So this is my last slide. Margrethe already mentioned it. Purchasing renewable energy credits is going to be a component of our portfolio for achieving our 100% renewable energy goal. Like it has to be. We're always going to consume. We cannot install enough solar to offset all of the electricity we consume as an organization. But there are these values, things that we have to talk about. We're a municipality. We want the cheapest option. But if you do the cheapest option and you buy wind from Texas, there's no economic development benefit for Michigan. There's no jobs benefit for Michigan. We don't get the environmental benefits in Michigan, right? They get them in Texas where they're producing the wind. So yes, it's easier because it's cheaper, but it's also not driving more demand. It's not driving more renewable generation, as Margrethe said, and it's not supporting our local economy, but those things come at a higher price. So at this point in time, I anticipate we'll have a blended portfolio of that. I'd like to see us do as much that is local in Michigan as possible. And we're exploring all of our solar installation first, because buying renewable energy credits is always a premium, right? It's always an extra cost if you want to achieve that goal. And so that's something that we're looking at, but as an extra cost. And I've done a lot of modeling for how much it'll cost for us to meet these different goals and how much it would cost. And we're actually getting ready to get some additional information and estimates for our Butterworth landfill. So we'll have a better understanding of how much would it cost for us to install solar there, so that we can have conversations about whether we can continue to move forward under the current option that we're looking for. So I'll stop there. Thanks.
Thanks, Allison. This has been a great conversation, and there is a lot of questions in the chat and in the Q&A. So I'm going to try to give them to you in a way that makes sense, but I apologize in advance if I skip around a little bit. I think that the first thing I want to hit is the storage question. Has there been any consideration around storage for our solar, since we have to use what we're generating? Is there an option for storage, and has that been explored by the city? And maybe there's other people that have comments on this as well.
My quick answer is I've looked at it, would love to if we had battery storage for Butterworth or other areas. It's a huge benefit for a lot of reasons. It is exorbitantly expensive still at this time. And even though the battery costs have been coming down, I wish I had the number in front of me. I think I Googled it, but even trying to figure out, I think like battery storage for, I don't know, and Eric, you might be able to help me remember, but even like a 1 megawatt, maybe 2 megawatt array was like in the billions of dollars. Okay, like billions. I mean, I looked at the number and I was like, nope, not unless the federal government wants to give us the money, right? Like,
so storage is, interestingly, in DTE's service territory, at least, in terms of small solar that's coming online, the amount of solar coming online paired with storage has been increasing exponentially. And I think what's happening is because the outflow rate, what you get back from the company if you put that on the system, has gone down, it makes more financial sense for customers. They're like, well, my excess, I'm getting nothing for my excess, no value for my excess, or very little, not enough. So I'm just going to keep it and offset more of my usage at different times. So it's definitely increasing in usage, which means what you're seeing is pushback on the regulatory side, especially with these interconnection rules. The utilities want to add the storage capacity to the solar capacity, so that if you have like a 10 kW array and a 10 kilowatt storage system, you now have a 20 kilowatt distributed generation system. And that's the case even if you have like a like there are lots of technologies that can limit the amount that goes back on the system, that make it so like you're never going to be putting 20 kilowatts back in the system. So it's a big point of debate, and it's going to be a very contentious issue in these interconnection rules.
Fair enough. Got a great question in here too about the river, and if there's any way during the adding the rapids back into Grand Rapids, if there's any potential of creating energy from that work.
Yeah, so it's something that I know I looked into when I first got to the city, which was in 2017, because it was a great question posed to me. Essentially, could we have, hydro generated electricity from the river? And I guess two things open to continuing to explore, but the two things that I really found at the time, again, though this was 4 years ago, a lot of things have changed. One, right, there's a lot of sensitivity. There's already so many complexities to putting the rapids back into the river in terms of that process and project and how long it is, and not wanting to implicate any of the commitments that have been made to, fisheries and recreation and everything else. But second, at the time when we looked at the technology that you could deploy kind of horizontally across the river, again, it financially didn't make sense in terms of how much could be produced and how expensive the technology was.
So I'm going to just read this note, to Allison. The transition to renewable electricity is great. How is the city addressing natural gas and other fossil fuel consumption?
Yeah, thank you. So I didn't get too much into that. We do have, just last September, City Manager Washington announced a goal of 85% carbon emissions reduction for our municipal operations by 2030 and net zero by 2040. So we are very much working on that, and understand that that's something I forgot to mention, but we've modeled, again, not taking into cost into consideration, we've modeled if we hit our 100% renewable energy goal by 2025, we should be situated to achieve an 85% carbon reduction goal by 2030. And again, if you remember the very first slide I showed, because we mostly use electricity, and right now, predominantly all of our greenhouse gas emissions come from electricity consumption. So hitting our 100% renewable energy goal will help us significantly with a carbon reduction goal. And I still need to spend some time and have some outside experts help me understand for that remaining 15%, which is predominantly going to be natural gas consumption. And there's also some with our fleet too, in terms of fuels. What does that look like? How do we transition that to net zero, and how much might that cost?
Yeah, still lots of work to do as we transition to a lower carbon city and really state, country, world. Okay, Margrethe, we've got a question here from Ben, who's asking, given the utility's disposition to being the sole provider, has that affected how easy or not easy the interconnection process is?
So my perception of how that's impacted interconnection is that it has not been as significant a problem with small projects as it is with larger projects. So I think that for like the residential customer who wants to put solar on their roof, it hasn't been, it hasn't been hugely problematic. When you get into bigger projects, it becomes more complicated because the utility is more concerned about the impact that that size project could have on their system. There tend to be a lot more studies that need to be done. A lot of those studies are within the control of the utility. Many of them are necessary for, safety. There's always questions about like who has to pay for what and when. I think it adds an element, especially for a larger project. It increases the inequities of access to on-site solar generation, because a lot of times there are like down payments you have to make, or you have to commit to paying for studies that can be quite expensive and require you to have like a fair amount of disposable income on hand. And Eric, you should totally push back if you think I'm mischaracterizing anything. I'm trying to be fair in terms of like what the real challenges are.
No, I don't have any pushback. I'm just trying to think of, I look at it, it's almost synonymous when we're interconnecting one of our larger projects to the transmission system. Just looking at the capacity of the lines and the infrastructure that might be required. And, I know when I talk to our solar development team, even about some of our small projects, I always like to think of the solar projects maybe as how do we build them sooner, quicker? But their comment back to me is that, especially when you start talking about interconnections, it does seem more like a customizable hot rod depending on the area or the location of the facility.
Let's stay with Eric too. I got a couple of people, and Greg notes that this might be a naive question, but there are no naive questions. And he's asking about why would the clean energy prices continue to rise if the expense of coal or natural gas to produce the power no longer exists? Can you talk to that at all?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think, the response I would give is by no means am I a market expert around electricity, energy or capacity prices. I would just say, when you think about it, you have, it's a combination of supply and demand. And what we're seeing, and this is not even consumers' energy, but if you look at third-party independent forecasts, is that energy and capacity values are rising in this region. And that, I know this sounds a bit high level, but I mean, I would look at it, it's supply and demand is what drives that price. So.
I
Let me
think that,
go ahead.
well, I was just going to add one thing there too. So what we pay as the consumer of electricity, in my mind, I boil it down to like two things outside of fees and other ancillary things. It's right. It's the actual electricity that's been generated, but then it's all the lines and the distribution to get to you. So even if how you're generating it is cheaper, there's still a big cost component is how you get it to your facility and on the grid. And there's lots of questions about, well, solar's sited in urban fields and far away from everybody using, or wind, and then how much extra transmission lines and who has to pay for that and all of that. So I know that that's part of the factor as well.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked a lot about, Eric's presentation talked a lot about our transition to renewable energy and a lot about commercial buildings. But, equity is incredibly important to us in Grand Rapids and to, I'm sure, a lot of cities throughout Michigan. And Sini asked, can you speak to how consumers will prioritize neighborhoods of focus and people who are on a lower income and maybe struggle with a higher energy burden? How will they be prioritized through this clean energy process? Oh, Eric, you're on mute.
Apologies. Yeah, so great question. And I think the result of our clean energy plan is a lot of outreach and input from stakeholders and communities. So it's not, us doing this in a vacuum. And I would say this too, is that, and I think Alison had touched on this, as part of our Solar Gardens program, we do have a component of that. It's called My Sunrise. And effectively, you have participating nonprofit agencies that would pay that initial subscription cost, and an income qualified customer would receive the benefit, tangible benefit value of that electricity credit on their bill. And then also part of that program, it's coupled with energy efficiency, weatherization of their actual home. So, that is a program that we do have to serve our income qualified customers, and would also be looking to expand that through Butterworth.
I think one thing I'll just add there real quick, Sini, I think through E.H.Zero, one thing that I haven't studied yet, but that I'm really interested to know is for an individual house, right, to have that 100% consumption of electricity produced 100% of the time, like what size would that be for some of our low income neighborhoods? Maybe there's a place where it's, I don't know, that I want the analysis to be done, like a size of this much solar installed on your home, we know we'll have a return on investment, right? And if we get to that point that we can do that, then it's more of a mechanism of figuring out how to pay the upfront costs, right? And have the costs spread out over time so that the actual cost of the solar is less than what that homeowner would be, or tenant would be saving in electricity bills, right? So the savings would essentially pay for the cost of solar and then hopefully have additional savings on top of it. But that's something I hope to explore through E.H.Zero to know whether that exists or not.
And there's been a lot. I mean, so I think that there's the low income offerings are not great, I don't think, and they could be better. I think everyone agrees with that. Energy efficiency has done a lot more with respect to low income access. And there have been some great settlements with consumers and with DTE that have like more creative and more practical ways of making energy efficiency available to low income customers. I don't think we're there yet with other offerings from the utilities, especially on renewable energy, but I think there's a lot to learn and we need to keep pushing for that in terms of like carve outs and pilot programs and just reinvesting in those areas. So keep pushing.
Apologies, I didn't realize I'd muted myself. I was going to ask you, Margrethe, how would a typical resident or a building owner or anybody operating a building, how would they get involved in the regulatory process if they wanted to get involved and, you know, put their comments on? Is there ways that they can get involved in that?
You can always comment on dockets that are in front of the Michigan Public Service Commission, but like you can send in a letter and you can do that and it will be read and it will be looked at. And I think that's useful. There are also working groups that the staff at the Michigan Public Service Commission run. And if you're interested, you could be involved in one of those working groups or stakeholder groups. And contacting folks at the Michigan Public Service Commission staff is probably the best way to figure out like, where is it most useful to have individual, you know, like community input. I also think that working with like call consumers and talk to whoever is there. If you are a company that's large enough to have your own representative, I guarantee you that representative will not know everything about the offerings and probably might not know anything about some of these renewable energy offerings. But if you ask, then they will have to figure it out. And then the next customer who calls them, who they have a relationship with, they will be able to provide that information. So I think that there's like doing those things is helpful. Yeah, and Signy put testimony in the last consumers IRP case. So also like, you know, reach out to people like me and maybe you'll end up being a witness.
Awesome. Back to Eric. I wanted to ask you, Drew has a question here about what impact, if any, will the potential shutdown of the Palisades plant have on our goals here in Michigan?
Yeah, good question, Drew. And I don't have the level of detail or the knowledge to respond sufficiently to that question. So apologies.
Fair enough.
I can tell you that all of the planning that's been done has assumed the shutdown of Palisades, and all of the modeling, consumers has assumed that it will not be relying on that contract with Palisades. And there is absolutely enough capacity available to ensure resource adequacy. So my answer is it's not a problem because it has been assumed to happen. It has been planned for.
Awesome. From Drew again, she's understands that there's reasons for requirements to exist, but is there any possibility of a variance or an exception on a case-by-case basis, particularly with Butterworth, to make it a reality for the city of Grand Rapids? Can you speak to that at all, Eric?
I guess I'm not sure I fully understand the question, so.
Well, Drew can jump in and Margrethe, maybe you can help, but I think my sense of the question, because I get this, like, isn't there an exception to the existing rules and regulations because it's Butterworth, like it's this landfill? And I think the short answer is no, there is no exception for it. It's actually probably harder. But I think that, what I find promising is the new, if you look in consumers filing for their new voluntary green pricing program, they are advocating and requesting a process by which these types of closed brownfields and Superfund sites, which are just very difficult properties, typically located in urban areas, to reuse because they have risks associated with them. They have remediations that have been put in place that need to be protected for a long time. And generally, people just get really nervous about the legalities and the risks associated with them. And in recognition of that and how difficult it has been, and that the market really hasn't developed financially feasible cost solutions for these properties, that exploring some opportunities through the new voluntary green pricing program to be able to, I wouldn't necessarily call it an exception, but I think it gets to what you're asking. It allows for municipalities and schools that have these type of properties that are brownfields or Superfund sites where we want to have solar, and how can we work together and better partner in a way that can hopefully make it more financially feasible, because right now market solutions are not providing an opportunity for us to be able to do that.
Thanks for that. Well, with just 2 minutes left and time has went very quickly, I hope I got to all the questions. But I'd like to just give each one of you a chance. If there's something that you can think of that you didn't say that you'd like to wrap up with, or perhaps you saw a question in the chat or in the Q&A that I missed, here's our chance to address that.
I can start, Sherry. So I guess I would just say in closing, I mean, and I think Margrethe had kind of hit on this, is that we're here to help and to educate. So if you have questions and you're a customer of ours and you need to know where to start, and it could be with energy efficiency, it could be with demand response, it could be with a renewable offering, installing EV charging on your property. I guess the message that I want to convey to this group is that we are here to help you achieve your goals and to meet your needs.
I think I could just, well, go ahead, Margrethe.
I was gonna say, and like on in that vein, it's our job as customers and as advocates to keep the utilities accountable. They're a regulated monopoly, and they have that privilege because they've entered into an agreement, basically a compact saying we're going to do what's best for customers, but they need some accountability for that. And it's our job to provide that accountability, which can be done in a really constructive and collaborative way. So I encourage everyone to do that.
Yeah, I would just say, I think in closing, for those of you particularly in the Grand Rapids area, through the E.H.Zero program, we want to be better partners with consumers and others to help you better understand this information and the process. And I'm willing to share the journey I've gone on. I know others, have successfully installed solar or can share what they've learned from it. And I just want to try to make the process more transparent so everybody can understand and get to a faster point of understanding, is this something that's viable for my facility and at what cost, so that you can be making decisions about whether you want to install solar, whether it's right for you to engage with consumers on their large customer renewable energy program because you don't want to do it on site, and you can work with them and that makes a better financial case for you. So I think that there are pathways available for us to do this. And I'm going to continue to work with consumers and Margrethe and others through E.H.Zero to try to get more of this information available to people in our community, because I just think we need to do a better job of helping people understand how to do it and providing resources, particularly for individuals and for small and medium-sized businesses, and particularly those in our BIPOC communities. And we're going to keep trying at the city to the extent that we can be, a first mover. I think that's important, and we're trying, and we're doing our best. And, I understand we're like consumers in some respects, and appreciate those in the community that keep pushing us to do more. And, let's keep working together to find some creative solutions to get us there.
Awesome. Well, I just, in closing, want to say thank you to our speakers, Eric, Allison, and Margrethe. We really appreciated having you here, and I know time is valuable, and we appreciate you spending your time with us this morning. I want to call your attention to some links that have been put in the chat. We have a great zero carbon resource library on our website. That's there, and you can visit the E.H.Zero page that we've talked quite a bit about on the city's website, and that link is there for you. A link to past recordings, and don't forget about the upcoming May 5th, 2 weeks from now, webinar where we're going to discuss compliance pathways for carbon neutral buildings and dive deep into zero code. So thank you everyone for being here. Great day. And thank you all for your comments and questions. And we will send this recording out to each one of you who's attended the webinar. So you will have that and the slides that Allison presented today. And I assume we'll include Eric's as well. We'll send those out to you as later on, probably in a day or two. So thank you, everybody. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.